All right, December 25th, 7:28. I'm doing a second video because I was just mentioning this Reuters article from today, 5:25, a couple hours ago. And it's disappeared. I found it. Fortunately, I'd saved it, but I can't find it anymore on Apple News. It might be because they reveal too much in this piece. I'm going to see if I can locate where it's dumped somewhere else. But it says Putin says Russia ready to negotiate over Ukraine. Kyiv voices doubts. Moscow. President Vladimir Putin said Russia was open to negotiations over the war in Ukraine and blamed Kiev and its Western backers for a lack of talks, a stance Washington has previously dismissed as posturing amid persistent Russian attacks. Well, it's not posturing, and it hasn't been posturing. Putin, since the beginning of the war, has wanted to stop the fighting and just cease fire and leave Ukraine as intact as it is, and the countries that are traditionally ethnically Russian as restored to Russia, which is what they voted which is what they wanted. So we have this unbelievable, to me, Reuters story that all of a sudden tells the truth in the first paragraph. But then it goes on to give this, we are ready to negotiate with everyone involved about acceptable solutions. But that is up to them. We are not the ones refusing to negotiate. They are. Putin told Russia One state television in an interview broadcast on Sunday. Yeah, he's been saying this all along. I mean, I'm following international reports. Reuters it doesn't print the truth, and nor do lots of other media outlets. I'm challenging the U.S. media as being disinformation and a fantasy land of false stories and false information. That includes Fox News and Forbes. It includes the entirety of Western media in Europe and Western media here, Canada, Australia. They follow this exactly what happened in the Iraq War. If nobody remembers that, I assume, but myself. Exactly what happened in the George W. Iraq War, where anything that was outside the narrative of this fantastic victory and all, it was going to be a cakewalk, as the planners of it called it, a guy named Kenneth Pollock, and we'll pay for it with the Iraqi oil. So this is what was being printed, for months, until all of a sudden we lost the war. How did this happen? Oh my God! How did this happen? Well, we never won it in the first place, is how it happened. Just like the war in Ukraine, we never won it in the first place. All of these reports about Russian losses and them, Putin crumbling and he's going mad and he's having nervous and he's rushing off to Belarus to beg for troops to help him because he doesn't, his ammo. The Washington Post is still reporting this. It reported that the troops which is a flat out lie, that the troops that were drafted are criminals, like they're the Chinese, like they're conscripts and criminals left from the prison. I mean, it's just like, you have to portray today's modern Russia as the Kremlin of Khrushchev or something, because that's American. They've seen it on TV for 50 or 60 years, so it's all grim, everything's gray, everybody's standing in bread lines, they've got old clothes, they don't have anything modern or Western. We do a little tour of Moscow, and compare it to New York City. That's a real eye-opener. Or compare it to what Vancouver is like now, or Toronto is like now, or Paris, which is having riots because a Kurdish person, 3 Kurds were shot, by a white person. They don't know if it's a hate crime, what. So the Kurdish community has gone out and is rioting and overturning vehicles, and they're trying to settle that down. I'm just bringing it up in contrast to the orderliness of that society, where those kind of demonstrations aren't going on and the streets aren't all graffitied and windows broken, like you have in Paris even before these riots. I mean, we're a society that is like at war with itself internally, with all of these different ethnic groups that have been turned against, through the media, egging on racial hatred. So whether you're Kurd or whether you're black or whether you're Hispanic or Asian or whatever, you're at war, just like the mafia wars back at the turn of the century. So Irish need not apply was what you had in Boston. Irish were discriminated against in Boston, so that's who took over they formed the Irish Mafia. There's the descendant Whitey Bulger and JFK and the Kennedys and, the Democratic Party is a criminal organization. Duh. Why doesn't anybody understand the history of American politics? The ward bosses, the ward healers. It goes back to the 19th century with Edgar Allan Poe was in Baltimore in voting, and he was press gang, where they give people alcohol and bust them around to vote under different assumed names in different districts. I mean, this is the history of America. So it has, all of a sudden, we aren't in a society of virtuous, loving people who want to change the world for the better and bring, John Lennon, and we're going to imagine a better world, and, all you need is love. Really, open your eyes. So I'm just getting, giving the perspective of why putting all that on Putin is like the pot calling the kettle black, when we are the ones who are in disarray. We are the ones who don't have ammunition. We are the ones who soldier. The Ukrainian soldiers are freezing at the battle lines. They don't have warm clothing. They're unprepared. They're just being fed into the Western media's grandiose notion of, the victorious Ukrainians. So they've been slaughtered, basically, and they're starved of information because Zelensky has a press blackout. They can't print anything. There's no news because nobody's allowed near the front, no reporters. Western reporters just stay back, and he just dictates, to the press, or to Joe Biden, and they dictate to the U.S. people, and everything's going great. So, welcome to reality. Well, welcome to my reality anyway. Russia single-handedly attacked you. Wait, let me go back. We are ready to negotiate with everyone involved about acceptable solutions, but that is up to them. We are not the ones refusing to negotiate, they are. As advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, Putin needed to return to reality. Isn't this wonderful? See, it's Putin who's not living in the real world. Voldemort Zelensky, as I call him, and Joe Biden and the Americans, we're in reality. Putin's got to return to reality. He's nuts. He's really crazy. An advisor said Putin needed to return to reality and acknowledge it was Russia which did not want talks. Right. They just say they want talks, and on world news that say we're ready to negotiate. We have been wanting to negotiate. The world press is covering all this. So Zelensky has to insist, well, why would Russia's president say we want to negotiate if he didn't want to negotiate? And why would Zelensky say he wants to negotiate when he says, I don't want to negotiate? It's funny in a black humor kind of way, which is all that I can get out of the world today, is a very black view of our future because of this reality denial, to insist that we're winning the war in Ukraine with millions of people dying, millions of refugees, and then start screaming about war crimes. Well, the war crimes are being committed by Ukrainians and have been for years, shelling civilian populations. And killing prisoners of war. So there is a inversion. It's just as Orwell described. It's this inverted reality. Good is evil and evil is good. I see it from the Bible. You call good evil and evil good. That's why I see everything in biblical terms, because the truth is revealed in Scripture. In end times, people, just like Orwell is saying, the truth is a lie and the lie is true. In this case, we're good and Putin is evil, and no matter what, we're always good. So if we invade Russia and they don't just surrender, if they fight back and start bombing buildings, well, they're evil, regardless of who started it. That doesn't. You're in a war, regardless of who started, you're in a war. It's not a war crime to fight back against the enemy that you're at war with. On what planet? Well, it's planet America, I guess, or whoever's believing this. Like Reuters is making it really clear now in this article, at least to me. That's why it's disappeared. But it's not going to disappear from reality, to put it mildly. So here I am on Christmas with this. I don't celebrate Christmas and I don't have a Christmas tree. I don't go to the church masses. I have my own relationship with God. So I'm a Christian, but I have nothing to do with, what passes for Christianity, which is warmongering, incidentally. I mean, that's the problem with Christianity in this country, that we're for every single war. We Christians, which I'm no longer a part of, because there are Christians like myself who are anti-war, and so there's a small minority, and I would encourage others to come over to that version of whatever belief, which is anti-war. Russia's February 24 invasion of Ukraine has triggered the deadliest European conflict since World War II and the biggest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the '62 Cuban Missile Crisis. There is thus far little end in sight to the war. That's a lie. There is thus far little end in sight to the war. No, the end in sight is like right today. The Kremlin, because the West won't negotiate for peace. So that means Russia is going to attack. The Kremlin says it will fight until all its aims are achieved, while Kiev says it will not rest until every Russian soldier is ejected from all of its territory. And it's like, what does that even mean? What does it consider to be all of its territory? The territory that's already taken by Russia? And how are they going to eject them? Well, they're not going to be able to eject them because they don't have any troops and they don't have the weapons to eject them. They're facing an overwhelming army. Though we describe it, you wouldn't know in the West because they're just described as ragtag conscripts and people running away to get away from this evil dictator, and they're bombing their own police stations or whatever. In other words, it's describing us. Like, who's rushing out to suit up? Who's rushing to the recruiting centers? Well, try to institute a draft in this country like what Putin just did, and gets they've got unlimited numbers of people they can draft. They're even extending the draft from the 500,000 that are prepared, because they're prepared for a war against us. It's the whole West. Like, if we're not going to accept peace negotiations, they're going to keep, defending themselves is what they're doing, because they were attacked. They'd been attacked for 8 years. It comes up later, actually, in this piece. So I'm not making it up. Reuters has finally printed the truth. Putin has said in the past that Russia is open to negotiations. There you go. That's what I was just saying. He's been saying the whole time that they want to stop the war. So they they phrase it a little slyly, but has made it clear it must be on his terms, which would involve Ukraine bowing to Moscow's demands and accepting Russia's annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions. Kyiv, backed by the West, has made clear that is unacceptable. Okay? The U.S. State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but in October, when Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov voiced an openness to talks, Department spokesman Ned Price told the regular news briefing, "We see this as posturing." Who's posturing? "We do not see this as constructive." Ned Price is this pencil neck bureaucrat guy that, looks like Pee Wee Herman or something. "We see this as posturing." Posturing. "We do not see this as a constructive, legitimate offer to engage in the dialogue and diplomacy that is absolutely necessary to see an end to this." Who talks like this? I mean, look, not in World War II. People didn't talk like they're. It's, you know what it is. It's PC talk. Like, they're going to have to use the right words if they, before we come to the table. Like, this is just posturing. Yes, we want to have negotiations, and these are our demands. So you negotiate around what Russia wants, and you have to accept conditions on the ground, or you just keep fighting and fighting a losing war. Whoever started it. But it turns out that Ukraine started it. Russian attacks on power stations have left millions without electricity. There you go, said Zelensky. And the last few days of 22 were dark and difficult. Russia and this is where he's talking about himself, but he uses the word Russia. "Russia has lost everything it could this year. I know darkness will not prevent us from leading the occupiers to new defeats, but we have to be ready for any scenario," he said in an evening video address. So when the warped mind of Zelensky, which is apparently covers most of Western viewers, because they just believe whatever the false narrative is, always have, always will. I'm just curious what's going to happen now when they see that Zelensky's madder than a hatter, thinking that Russia has lost everything it could this year. All you have to do is do a Google search of the streets of St. Petersburg and Moscow, and to see it doesn't look like Kiev, it doesn't look like Kherson, it doesn't look like Bakhmut, which is now all but destroyed, with just 100% losses in Ukrainian divisions going in there just to stall it long enough so you could have Christmas and have some more photo ops of Zelensky coming into Washington. They didn't even greet him with Kamala Harris. They send some protocol officer out to welcome him. Come on in. We're ready for your big televised appearance. For the American people are going to stand up. Well, what's it all about? It's about pouring another $40 billion down a sinkhole. So it's profiteering. It's war profiteering by our government and our military contractors, just like all these wars are. This is what the left says, incidentally, up until I don't know when they became chameleon-like, that now they're warmongers. They were anti-war. When I was back in the left, my lefty days, everybody was pro-Soviet. They were pro-Moscow. Bernie Sanders was pro-Moscow. I mean, he had his marriage in Moscow. He was one of the lefties. So, all of a sudden, it's like they're the evil empire. Oh, first, Cuban, he's pro-Cuban, he's pro-communism. He's pro-Nicaragua, Sandinistas. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders, the senator from Cuckoo Land. And now now he's a war, we'll defeat this evil dictator. Is America so far gone that it doesn't see a schizophrenic flip in one person? He hates the West. He hates America. You know, they're warmongers. They're imperialists. That's the whole rhetoric of the left. Then the next minute, it's like he loves the way we're being attacked by the evil empire, the communists that I just loved yesterday. That I was, you know, man, oh man, is this connecting with anybody? Russian troops had shelled dozens of towns and positions along the front line, it said in a Facebook post. Yeah, that's for sure. Zelensky, referring to a strike on the southern city of Kherson on Saturday that officials say killed at least 10 people, vowed, "We will find every Russian murderer." I mean, how are they going to do that? It doesn't, none of this connects at all with reality, with the reality of people in battle. It's like Zelensky is with Sean Penn. And he, you know, Sean Penn and he are exchanging awards with each other, you know, ceremony, you know, here's my Hollywood trophy and here's the Order of the Blue Garter for us. And, you know, to talk about, you know, hey, you know, that's the Nazi Azov brigades. They have a Nazi battalion. You know, these guys are oh, well, okay, let's go. Reuters reports it. Finally. No, but it's disappeared. It's just like the Paul Pelosi story. Man, sometimes I feel like I'm gaslighted by. That's what AI does, or that's what gaslighting is. Like everybody sees, you know, buys into the false information. So when the real information shows up, it just this doesn't compute. It doesn't, you know, how could this be? I've never seen any of that. I remember in the past people say, I've never seen that before. I've never seen that printed before. Yeah, because all you're reading is propaganda from the New York Times. Of course you haven't heard that before. I mean, you'll hear it like a couple of years from now. Like you'll hear this in 6 months, maybe. I mean, you're going to, or maybe if you're watching, you'll see that you know, and guess what? I'm not gloating about it. I think it's a horror story, and it's detestable that they ran this scam so that all these people died for no reason. I believe that we are acting in the right direction. This is Putin, right? Putin accused the West of trying to cleave Russia apart, which is what happened when they took those border states and Crimea. I believe that we are acting in the right direction, Putin said. We are defending our national interests, the interests of our citizens, our people, and we have no other choice but to protect our citizens. So he was protecting his citizens from Ukrainian bombs shelling those republics or states. Asked if the geopolitical conflict with the West was approaching a dangerous level, Putin said, "I don't think it's so dangerous." In other words, he doesn't think it's that dangerous because it's not dangerous for them. The West and Ukraine no longer pose any danger to Putin. And the reality is that the story gets changed as everybody knows this of how vaporware looks. It's like things that are there one day are not there the next day. So the reality shifts. The unfortunate thing, and that's why I keep referring to this mass psychosis. You know, it's a constant theme with me in terms of people believing. They say they don't believe it. I mean, I never hear anybody says they trust the government or they trust the news, but they actually do. They actually, the very people that will say, and this is, I'm thinking of one of these prepper communities where they're getting ready for war with everybody. War with Antifa, war with the government, war with Russia, war with China. They're ready for this kind of, it's a paranoid schizophrenia. People that have, and they're military. At least the guy who does the show. I'm not going to point names, but it's the person who does the show, the video tube, and he's been doing it for years. And it's always the end of the world. Well, now it is. But it's always, they've anticipated the same thing because they're combat people. And so you have a large part of the country that's ready for a civil war. And then you have the government, the mass media, telling a bunch of lies about the Ukraine war and being believed by the very people that don't believe anything the government says. That everything's, why do they believe it's all lies? Because they've been through false flag after false flag. And if you're in the Army, you know about Gulf of Tonkin, and you know about the false, Downing memo and how we got into Iraq. It was done with fake presentation of chemical weapons that Colin Powell presented before the UN. Here are where they have the chemical weapons and they have to be taken out right away. So we went to war on false information, but it was manufactured false information. And this just goes on and on and on. But why? That's the psychosis. That's the incredibly effective, and what George Orwell pointed out, the incredibly effective brainwashing, that if people listen to it, they believe it. In other words, if they don't listen to it and then go to 5 other sources and check whether this is true and go to overseas news, then they believe it. Even though they've been lied to continually, year in and year out from the same source. That's that's a Ponzi scheme. You go from one Ponzi scheme to the next. Whether it's financial fraud like you see on Wall Street, that's all collapsing. Whether it's with your pastor, the priests and pastors, particularly the prophecy group in the Christian movement. They prophesy Trump is going to win the election, so he loses the election. So they keep prophesying he's going to win the election. So this causes this whole debacle for the Republican Party because they're trying to cover up for the fact that they were all false prophets. So you just create a war. It doesn't matter whether it's right or left. It's the same strategy. When you're a charismatic, if you're Charlie Manson, I remember reading the Charlie Manson book. He had to keep up in the ante, because he had followers who were expecting big things out of the God, the guru, who was taking them to ultimate nirvana. The same thing with Jim Jones. You have to keep, seeing the rest of the world as out to get you, and the paranoid schizophrenia. Manson was a group of paranoid schizophrenics, but they were also demon possessed. That's where I see it on the spiritual level, that other people aren't seeing it on. That there's a connection between Manson and Sharon Tate and Rosemary's Baby and satanic practices of Roman Polanski in his film, and the satanic practices of the Church of Satan of Anton LaVey, where Manson got sued, one of his murderers who was a prostitute in the Church of Satan, came with Manson. Bobby Beausoleil, one of the Manson murderers, came through the satanic church. So that's a reality. And this thinking that the news is anything but propaganda and brainwashing, which will convince you that there is no spiritual reality, there is no God, there is no Satan. It's just good and bad people that are fighting each other, and greed and all those things, and it's terrible that it's a dark world. It is terrible that it's a dark world, but it's a lot darker, and it's getting darker as the year goes on, and it's going to get really dark in 2023 because all of this transhumanist, super robots, neural implants, pestilences are not going away. None of this is going away because it's end times. So I'm encouraging people to prepare themselves spiritually because there's knowledge that comes with scriptural reading. There's knowledge that is in people have their there's knowledge in Aleister Crowley and in Theosophy and in these occult practices. There's knowledge, but that's what has overcome the world now. So the only antidote to that knowledge is the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's enough for this evening. Getting tired. God bless everybody, and I hope you had a good Christmas.